Welcome to My Forever Home, the podcast. I'm Frances Cosway and I've helped hundreds of people create forever homes. I can't wait to share the journey with you. So let's start. Welcome everyone to Your Forever Home, the podcast. We are now at episode 12 of the Bathroom Design Essentials season. And for the fourth episode in a row, I'm now welcoming back again Cathryn and Trisha from Reece Bathroom Life in Brighton in Victoria. And today we are going to be talking about basins. So bathroom basins, there's so many different types available. I'm a big fan of utilising basins as part of the design scheme in your bathroom. But there's a lot of considerations with regards to the type of basin that you would like to use in your bathroom, from cleaning to materials to aesthetic. So we're going to be talking about that today. So again, welcome Cathryn and Trisha to this episode.
Hello.
Now, let's start with the type of basins available. We've got my favourite, above counter, and there's absolutely no denying that they are my favourite. We've got inset, semi-recessed, different types of semi-recessed in how that's defined. Walk us through the different types of basins.
Okay, so above counter, as you say, it's your favourite. I think we sort of find that that's probably the more popular choice here as well, because there are just beautiful designs and styles and all that sort of thing. So that obviously means that the whole basin, pretty much, apart from the plumbing, is going to sit above the counter. The other good thing about that is that then you don't lose, as much room in your vanity underneath because the basin's sitting on top.
The other thing I love about above counter, one, I feel that it adds to the overall design. It's something beautiful. I'm a big on having an organic shape there, so you're softening some curves. But the other thing I love about it is I feel that you get more bench space with it. That you've got a little bit more bench space. And even if things are sort of tucked under the basin a little bit, depending on how high, but I just feel that you've got a bit more space, a bit more of the bench is actually exposed. Sorry, Cathryn, go on. I'm a big fan of above counter.
That's okay. And that can be a nice feature as well. I just thought to go with a bath, for example. And I know we've talked about baths in a previous episode. So potentially, you could have a shape that is really lovely and marries nicely with your bath. So they're nice features together. The other types that you have, there is such a thing as undermount. So that's basically the opposite to the above counter because the whole basin would sit underneath. That does mean that you don't have quite as much storage underneath those basins, but they can look, lovely as well. And there are different shapes available.
Yeah, I think it's a very clean aesthetic. Some people don't like the aesthetic of having something on top. I think they feel that it breaks up all their lines. It's a lot, I suppose it's a much cleaner aesthetic. It's a lot simpler in its look. The other thing that I get asked a lot about is, I'm interested to hear your view, that it's easier to clean when there's an undermount. Now, I think this might be controversial. So what are your thoughts on whether it is actually easier to clean when you've got an undermount basin?
Yeah, I do get this a bit. Of course, cleaning is always very important when it comes up all the time. So I kind of go by not only what I think, but I guess what the opinions of others are. So what I find is, particularly with undermount, basically dirt's going to find a way to annoy you anyway. So it's going to get into the grooves. If it's undermount, if it's semi-inset, it will find a way to, get around the outside of the basin, and the same with above counter. But I think the general consensus is probably the undermount would be more difficult to keep on top of because you're trying to get underneath to clean it properly.
Yeah, so, where I find that clients feel that because they can wipe straight in, that they feel that makes that easier to clean. So that's a really interesting perspective.
Side of things. But the shape of above counter can help undermount can help as well. We have a couple of basins here that are undermount that are sort of a bit more of a smooth surface rather than sharp corners, because that will make it harder to clean.
Yeah, of course. Like with any sort of sink with the really 90-degree angles, that's always going to be harder to clean.
Yeah, okay. So more rounded or soft, that will help as cleaning process. There's another option that's sort of in between, so it's sort of half-half. So it's called semi-inset. So what that means is semi meaning half, that half of the basin is above the counter and you can see that, and the other half is underneath. So that's a bit of a compromise between the two, option 1 and 2 that we've already spoken about. There's another option which is semi-recessed, so not to be confused with the inset.
Yes.
This is actually half in, half out, if you like. So if you're wanting to save space a little bit, and even in an ambulance situation, I suppose, you have half of the basin that's in the counter and the other half just kind of pops out forward. That's a bit more of an old-fashioned style, I think, though. So
I agree. I think it is really old-fashioned.
Space, and that was really important. I probably wouldn't go with that option, but just so that your listeners know the terminology.
Which is important, because you could also argue that semi-recessed is the one that sits underneath rather than protruding at the front, is also semi-recessed, but it's actually inset. The terminology is important. I feel that the semi-recessed are quite old-fashioned. You see them in old hotels. There's a lot of bathrooms we're doing at the moment where I sort of sit there and look at it and think, why would you have done that when there's the depth is in the wall enough that you can have a full vanity? I feel that maybe it was a cost thing, that they've got less cabinetry material and then they've got a basin that sort of sits half out. But I agree. Well, not only are you going to get less bench space, and if you can always get more bench space, go for more bench space. But I think it is only used really when space is, you've got no choice because of the space constraints. Yeah.
That's generally how it seems to work as well. So that would be, not really a choice. It's just something that you kind of end up having to do. But the other 3 options are more of a choice and more popular, above counter definitely being, the biggest one of those, the more popular.
Yeah. The other thing I like about above counter, particularly for men, I find that men really like to have a deep basin, and they like to get close to the basin so they can splash their face with after shaving and all that sort of stuff. Now, that's obviously a personal use, but I find that as a generalisation, that is a requirement for men. I don't care what it looks like. Can you just make sure it's a deep enough bowl and that I can really splash around and, and wash my face? And I feel that you can do that better with an above counter than an undermount.
Yeah. Another thing with the depth of the bowl actually would be even with families, because I do find that people with families, they just don't want a shallow bowl because the kids are just going to splash it everywhere and it becomes quite messy. So you want a bit of depth in that situation too, probably.
Agree. So we can put the men and the kids in one category. They need a deep basin, and then women could really have anything. Am I being chauvinistic? Am I being sexist? No, I think that a deep bowl in any situation is always a good one. And that comes up for me a lot as well, Cathryn, about having a deeper basin for kids.
There are a couple of other options as well that's probably not quite as obvious when people are thinking about basins. So one of those would be what we call a wall-mounted basin.
Yes.
That basically, it can be 2 things, but usually it means that it's, say, in a powder room, for example, and you don't have much room to have the full vanity and all of that going on. So you just need a smaller basin that kind of just sits on the wall, and, you might just wash your hands and leave, and it's quite simple. You could actually, if you really wanted to, get a wall basin and create a cabinet underneath it, but it's usually just used on its own, I think. There's also sort of your pedestal and wash stand sort of option. So if you're really looking for something a bit luxurious and lovely for your powder room, which I have done quite a few times for clients, it basically just sits on the floor, and you've probably seen them in like hotels or nightclubs or something like that, for those who go to nightclubs, I guess, that they just sort of stand from the floor right up, and then you kind of use those, but they're a bit more high end.
And they're open. They're generally open. There's not a vanity in cabinetry. It is an open piece. And there are some really beautiful ones around like that. And I think there's a couple of points on that. If storage is not required, so in a powder room, it's not as needed, they can really look beautiful, and they open up the space because, of course, there isn't a block. It's not a block. It's very open. And with the back to walls, they were, you'd have a back to wall basin a long time ago as well in the main bathroom. I think it's because it was a cost effective option, but you're losing a lot of storage. But in a powder room, they are perfect. And I love the ones that Caroma, and there's other brands that do them as well, where they've got a bit of space at the side. It's not just the basin and the bowl itself, but they've got a bit of space at the side for your soap and so forth. I think that's fantastic for a powder room.
There are some lovely ones that even if you have the room, have a little shelf, like a literal shelf you can put things on, which is really lovely as well.
Yeah, it's integrated into the bowl. I think it's fantastic. So that they've really upped the notch, I think, up the ante on those of recent years, because they really weren't available 10 years ago. And then in terms of the material,
so in terms of materials, basins are made out of various materials similar to baths. We'll start with steel. We have a German brand called Alape who manufactures basins made out of steel, and then they're baked, enameled with these beautiful crushed materials.
So beautiful and elegant.
Yes, and strong.
Yes, you can imagine you can get really very, very fine edges with those basins because of the material compared to ceramic.
And I think for those, and this is where I specify Alape a lot, is when someone wants a very fine basin. Sometimes people are really turned off by basins that are really thick porcelain. They feel that it's just not very sophisticated. So having the Alape in that metal, I don't think you could ever achieve the fineness of the edges in a ceramic or a porcelain. That metal is the only material that you could really use to get that beautiful fine edge without it being sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. And they color enameled, so they are available in various finishes. Matte black or bicolor being one of the most popular, where there's white inside and matte black on the outside. And they are also available in a dark iron finish, which looks really moody in a dark kind of setting, or it can look very fresh in a fresh setting. So beautiful. Yes, a lot of options there. Then the next material is also solid surface. So similar to baths, they are crushed minerals mixed with resin. They make some beautiful sculptural above counter basins in that material. There's so many to fall in love with. They are available in thick as well as thin edges, so you can choose again. And the next material is porcelain or ceramic, which is the traditional material that basins have been made out of. Within ceramic, there has been a few technological advances, where one of the brands called Laufen now make ceramic with a mineral that's found in sapphires, which is what gives it its stability and strength to allow for very thin edges as well. So we can achieve thin edges in ceramics through a stronger material.
So I'm going to ask, can the Laufen basins have an edge on it as fine as the Alape metal edge?
Not as fine, but very close.
I was going to say, I don't think it's quite as fine. I've actually got a Laufen thing on my desk right here, and it's pretty fine, but it's not as crisp, not as fine as the metal.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
But they are beautiful basins. And then, so that's the porcelain. Now, you were saying before in the last episode about bars that we can actually get matte basins. Are they we can't get that in porcelain, though? It's only in a stone finish that you can have matte.
Correct. So solid surface is the material for matte finish. So they're the only ones that will be matte. And again, you can either decide to match it with the color of your bath, texture of your bath, or not.
Yeah.
So they have a matte and gloss, matte and gloss combination or not.
And I think the other basins that we need to, and what I'm seeing now is a lot more coloured basins, which is often then in a cement. So you can choose a colour of cement, and having those, in a cement basin in a different types of colours. There's also ceramic as in pottery. So Robert Gordon is doing basins in lots of different types of glazes. So I really feel that we're going back to the 70s in that regard, but they are very elegant and very beautiful and really set a bathroom off in a particular type of aesthetic and a particular type of home. And again, you can choose your shape and you can choose your glaze. And then the other one, and this is a bit left of field, but this is something that I was obsessed with when I was doing my house, but we didn't do it in the end, is you can actually get a big, well, I suppose it's a rock, but I'd call it a pebble. And you get them, so they're very organic. Every single piece is different. And then you actually have the bowl carved out of the actual pebble. And so that's quite a unique feature. And every single piece is different. So you'd have to go and choose your own type of basin. So they're the other ones that I can think of as well that are available, apart from what we're talking about just now.
I think I would probably just be a little careful with the stone side of things, though. Just from
the cement ones, you mean cement?
Yes. Yeah, from a cleanability point of view,
Yes.
Because, for example, you can kind of get a stone look in solid surface and you can, repair that, and it's not porous, it's non-porous. But if you're doing something more in the cement side of things, it is a porous material, right. And therefore you will find it a lot more difficult from a cleaning, like keeping on top of the cleaning point of view. So
that's absolutely valid. And again, it comes down to the quality of the basin, the cement basin as well. Some of them seal them. Yeah, exactly right, as with everything. So some of them seal them really, really well, and they have a superior finish on them, so they won't stain. But the thing that I see with the cement basins that are not a very good quality is they actually stain over time because they are porous. So it's not just, the cleaning issue is getting them clean, but then it is that they don't stain and they actually discolor because it's actually absorbing the materials or the detergents or whatever you're using. But the really high quality ones will actually have a very strong sealant on it that doesn't wear off, and that's going to then retain the color that you're using. Are there any not enamel, porcelain that we're seeing in color, like we're seeing the enameled colored taps? Are we seeing other coloured basins come through in other materials other than cement or concrete, I should say?
Yes, so ceramic basins in various colours are also out there.
So they're available. So that would be another option if you wanted to have colour.
That's right. And
then, of course, Alape had the black because they're doing the metals in different types of colours, but it might just not be bright yellow or hot pink.
Yeah, there's another way actually of achieving a bit of a pop of colour with some of the solid surface basins that we have, for example. They actually offer what's called a soft skin, which can be put around the outside of the basin and give it like a blush pink outside or green or a sort of royal blue or black, that kind of thing. So then you're kind of getting a bi-colour look, but it's not just black and white. You do have different options.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think if it's soft, it's not as glaringly, in your face. There is an Italian brand of basin that's porcelain they are really, really bright colours, every colour out of the rainbow. But that is a real statement piece.
Yeah.
And if it's above counter, it's it's easier to retrofit, although there's a lot of considerations still around the size of the cutout and everything else. But it is easier to retrofit than, say, an undermount basin. But again, like everything that comes and goes, the coloured basins, I feel, are making a big entry into the market at the moment in lots of different materials. How long are they going to stay? You've got to really love that colour if you're going to install it in your bathroom. Really, really love that colour. Really love it. So in terms of then the buying criteria, what are some of the things that you're recommending and getting, advising your customers that come into store in terms of why choose one basin over another?
I think something that's very important, which we've spoken about in a couple of other little episodes, would be shape.
Yes.
So that's something that I often ask people when they come in and want to talk about basins, because basins is something that isn't necessarily the easiest choice to make because it's quite an important part of the whole bathroom design. So the shape that they're looking for and the look that they're going for is something that I usually try and get at first. So whether they want it to be round, whether they'd like it to be oval, whether they'd like it to be sort of more rectangular or a soft square kind of look. So there's quite a few different shapes that will come into it. I guess also from a cleaning perspective and a strength and integrity of material point of view, that's something that's really important as well. Or if it's in a powder room, for example, you know, do you want to go for a look of opulence, something that's just a bit different and something that everyone gets to enjoy? So that would be part of my...
And I think what we were talking about before, even the depth of the basin is really important, and it's the internal depth that is important. So that, as we were saying before, being able to splash, the kids don't, you know, make everything flooded just because they've gone to brush their teeth. But the depth, I think, is really important as well.
And which bathroom it's going into, now that you've mentioned that, because if it's an ensuite or like a master ensuite, you might want to, or the parents might want to do something, you know, a bit more beautiful for themselves, but definitely keep it simpler in the main bathroom. So that does come into it as well.
And again, for the powder room, that may be an area where people want to splurge, like you were saying, but it might also be an area where the depth is not as important. They can have a shallow style basin because it's not going to be an area, well, the kids may be in there, but it's less used for, you know, your daily cleaning and things like that, your daily use. And then in terms of price, so there's lots and lots of different price ranges we've talked about. I mean, a Lape being a very specialised product, your Laufer also being a specialised product. Where are we starting at, and sort of where can we go in terms of price ranges?
Okay, I think, and jump in any time, but I think even just the installation choice, as in some of the undermount basins can be quite inexpensive but still look lovely. So they could be anywhere from around sort of $300. You can get beautiful above counter basins depending on the material at about sort of $500, $550. We're starting to move up to the beautiful Lape sort of basin or Laufen, something with a lot of quality to it. Then you're probably looking more at around, depending on the size, $1,200 to $1,500 for a basin. But that really is an investment, and particularly in a powder room, I find people really don't mind doing that because everyone gets to enjoy it, and it is that beautiful look and feel and just something everyone gets to enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even in my own, if I think back to my own, I have got a Laufer basin in my powder room, and I wanted it to be a standout, but also it's such an irregular shape. It's not, you know, I know Laufer sort of say they mimic the footprint, so it's very irregular. And because I'm an asymmetrical person, that really, you know, that really worked for me. Yeah, but I did, you know, Laufer was the only one that offered, and I think still do only offer that type of really irregular shape. So if you're after a very specific shape, you may need to spend a bit extra on it because it's not going to be available just in any sort of range. So the design is really an important part.
One thing I forgot to include in that price level would be the solid surface, actually. So they're not really too expensive. I wouldn't have thought for what they offer from a, you know, cleaning and, you know, repairable point of view, that they're coming in probably at around the $550 to $700 mark. So if you want the matte look, it's really quite easy to achieve.
Yeah. That's actually also the basins can be integrated. You can have a whole basin integrated into your bench top. And I know we'll talk about vanities in the next episode, but outside of the vanity, in a Corian type surface. So it's a solid acrylic surface, which is not made out of stone. It's made out of the acrylic, so solid acrylic surface. And that can actually be molded and used as a basin, and it's also part of the bench top. So it's effectively all in one, and then you have your vanity underneath that. So that is also another option, but that is a lot higher end because they have to make an individual mold whenever you're using a solid acrylic surface, but then you can have it customized to any shape that you like. And that is also very streamlined because it's part of the vanity top as well. So that is another option if you wanted to customize it even further, but that's not above counter. It's definitely built into the top. In terms, I'm just trying to make sure that we're covering everything off. Performance we've spoken about. What's really popular at the moment? You were saying that, again, not that I'm into the trends, but we know that colours coming in, above counter basins. What else are you seeing people are really gravitating to right now?
Circles are very, very popular at the moment.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, organic shapes are everywhere. The beautiful classical curves and circles definitely. Like D shapes, the arch kind of reversed.
Beautiful.
Walla has designed a beautiful new range for Laufen, and she's designed some basins and baths, and they are quite that, the arch reversed kind of D shape.
So when are they coming in? I am such a crazy fan of Patricia Ercler. It's like she's my design god. So for the listeners, Patricia Ercler is a Spanish designer, and I was saying offline to Cathryn and Trisha, I don't know what she doesn't design. She does furniture, she does tiles, she just does absolutely everything, and I don't know what she doesn't touch, but she's so talented. And then when I found out that she's now doing basins and bathroom things, it was like, wow. So obviously linked with a very high-end brand like Laufer. When's it coming?
But we are very, 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 very soon. We have the basins available. We're just waiting on baths. And definitely, I will invite you to
cannot wait for her to release something else. But yeah, what is she? I wonder when she's going to do her own taps. I'm sure that will come soon. Does fabrics? Yeah, she's such an amazing lady. Yeah. Cathryn, there was one thing that you were talking about. If we're doing a retro fish,
another beautiful feature of Patricia Ercler's basins contain are the vertical soft texture on the outside of the basin. Like vertical V grooves are so popular at the moment, and that kind of echoes that style in a basin and a bath as well. And the ridges are just, deep enough so you can feel them, but they're still easy to clean. So, you're not worried about things
getting in the grooves.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful feature. It looks lovely.
I think, and that's another, and because I'm so crazy about texture, that's another way to incorporate. You're not only incorporating shape, but then you've got this textural element, and it just, all these things just add to the whole overall design aspect. So I cannot wait for them to hit the market.
Yeah, it makes it a whole lot more interesting. It's beautiful.
Totally, absolutely. So shape, texture, materials, all those things just keep adding layer upon layer and adding to the overall design. So that's fabulous. Thank you so much, ladies. I think we've covered off lots of information about basins. There's so many choices out there, different materials, different shapes, different styles. It's going to depend so much on the design and the space that you have in your actual bathroom, and even, different bathrooms within your home, ensuite, powder room, maybe one or two additional bathrooms depending on the size of your home. They don't all have to be the same. And I'm probably a big advocate that they're not all the same. And I think a basin is a really good opportunity for you to have, you might have all the materials the same, but you've got different basins. So I think it's a really nice way to inject something different in each particular space. So there's lots of things to choose from. And just lots of ways that you can inject your own personality into the space with the basin. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. So that's been awesome today, ladies. Thank you so much again for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having us, Frances.
Thanks, ladies. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of My Forever Home. If you're ready to renovate or build a new home and you need help to create a beautiful and functional forever home, you can book a chat with me directly at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au/chat. Have a great day.